Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. Today is Friday, May 20th. We are almost at the end of May, which is really, really sad when you think of it like that. It has been an interesting week in the world of video games. We have a bunch of release dates for things, some new game reveals, and a few, delays as always. Which is kind of a bit of a sad thing, but it is what it is. In terms of stories this week that we're focusing on, there's some very, very interesting ones, and there's some very, very weird ones. So let's focus on something that is very, very cool and very, very wholesome, and that is that the Wholesome Direct is set to return this June. So the Wholesome Direct is exactly what it sounds like. It is a Nintendo Direct style presentation, but the content is all wholesome games. So you're not going to see any Doom or Call of Duty. You may not even see something like a Forza in here. These are games that are designed to basically make you go, "Aw," right? These are full-on adorable games. So when the show is happening is unfortunately, not a great time for us here in Australia. It is at 9:30 LA time. For them on the Saturday, which translates to 2:30 a.m. Sunday morning. So if you are planning to watch live, it is going to be a very early one. But let me just throw this little teaser trailer on here. So we know Little Gator is going to be here. So here's some of the games that are being shown. So as I said, that's Terra Nil. There's a bunch of these things. That's Little Witch, where it's not about getting the highest score, being the number one player in the world, solving, the mystery of who done it and, who murdered who and all that sort of stuff. These games are all about just embracing, the cute and cuddly side of things. This is not the first time they've done it. They did one last year as well. And as I said, it's more about, just making a nice, very chill, very calm, subject of games. As I said, it is called the Wholesome Direct. It is very, very much a product of its name. Last year, I believe, they had something about 45 games in there, so it was very packed in its content. I wouldn't expect this year to be any different. In terms of the full release lineup, they haven't said anything yet about it. As I said, we've seen some of the teasers because, that's what they've come out and said that they're doing. But beyond that, we don't know much more about it. It's just so puzzling places, railbound. There's a few things there. Whether or not this is something you're very interested in or something you're just not excited for at all because of its general content. I think, there's a lot of things that we can enjoy with it. And especially because, these are the sort of games that you can play in between, other games. So that weekend in June is now, starting to look like a regular E3. We have on the Friday morning will be the Summer Game Fest. It is Game, no S at the end. It's not Games Fest, which would make more sense. It is the Summer Game Fest. That showcase is happening at like 4 a.m. Friday morning. Sunday morning will be the Wholesome Games, or the Wholesome Direct, sorry. And then on the Monday will be the Xbox and Bethesda showcase. So it is going to be a very packed couple of days already. And as I said, this is a good thing to be a bit of a palate cleanser between all the chaos that the other two shows are likely to be full of. Speaking of chaos, we finally got information on Fall Guys for Switch and Xbox, and it's better than one may have expected. So last year, it's almost 12 months ago, we got word that Fall Guys was coming to Switch and Xbox. The game obviously launched originally back on PlayStation 4 and PC. PlayStation fans at the time were given the game as part of their PlayStation Plus membership, so it, basically gained, a whole lot of players out of the gate. Since then, it's been chugging along. It hasn't, done insane numbers in terms of sales or anything. but it's still doing very well. And obviously they do a lot of content, for the games. They've done some Sonic content, some Godzilla content. They've done some Ratchet and Clank stuff as well. So they've done a lot of stuff over the past, 12 months or so. Last year, Mediatonic's parent company, the Tonic Group, were bought by Epic Games. So because it's owned by Epic, it has to be free to play. And that's what's happening. So when the game hits Switch and Xbox on June 21st, it will also launch on PC through the Epic Game Store. There is talk that the Steam version will be removed at that point. They've done it in the past with Rocket League. If you own it already, you can still download it. That's fine, but you won't be able to get it new then. So they're looking. The rumor is that it'll happen the same here. But on the 21st, they're bringing the game to all platforms, including PlayStation 5. And when it does land, it will offer full crossplay. So you'll be able to play on Switch against people on PC. People on PC will be able to play against people on Xbox. Xbox against PlayStation. The other thing too is that if you already own the game on either PC via Steam or PlayStation 4, they're giving away what they call the Legacy Pack. So it's a bunch of costumes, some banners and a season pass, just to give you a bit more content. And that is even the true for those who got the game through PlayStation Plus. So, it's the same game that's been around for a couple of years now. There are some, level sort of creators in there now. There's a whole bunch of modes and games to play. But yeah, it's just more Fall Guys, available on more platforms, and as I said, being free to play. So let me just throw the old trailer up here. I'm sort of excited to see how it will play on things like the Switch. We know it's going to be it'll run at 30 frames a second, 720p handheld and 1080p docked. It'll be 60 frames on the the other consoles. That's pretty standard. But yeah, so the fact that it has cross progression as well. I mentioned the crossplay, but cross progression is a big thing. That means if you have been playing on PC and you now want to take it to the PlayStation, or you had the game on PlayStation, but you preferred the Xbox controller, you can now do that. You can take all your progress. You're not starting, from scratch. In the moment in the trailer, they will offer up the sort of list of modes, which is insane in terms of its number. And plus there's all the costumes and all the various prizes that you can sort of get when you do collect the crowns. So yeah, it is very cool that it is coming. I remember when I first got hinted about this game, and they basically said it's Takashi's Castle, but Funhouse, and I was like, that sounds interesting. And then at E3 that year, they had it set up in this like generic grey old school looking building, and you went inside, it was just colourful foam blocks everywhere. It was basically a daycare centre for children, but they had video games set up. So it was quite an interesting combination of I had just come from I had done the Fall Guys event, and then I went to see the John Wick game. So it was a really, the juxtapositioning between the two was quite unique. Also interesting, I didn't mention this too before, is that at the moment the game is officially called Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout. On June 21st, it is just going to become Fall Guys. So it's dropping the Ultimate Knockout from the title. It's losing its subtitle, if you will, and it's probably just to align with the fact that nobody calls it Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout. Whenever they talk about the game, they just call it Fall Guys, which makes sense. Why add unnecessary words onto it? It's like people will say Call of Duty Warzone or just Warzone, right? Both things work. In this case, nobody uses the subtitle for Fall Guys, so they're getting rid of it. Something that was announced earlier today was the newest card game for Marvel. So Marvel Snap is a collectible card game, very much in the vein of Hearthstone and Gwent, the former Elder Scrolls card game Legends, and there's a half a dozen other ones around. What is interesting is this is actually created by a studio called Second Dinner. This is their first game, but the founder of the studio and some of the lead developers inside the studio are former Hearthstone developers, with Ben Brody, the creative director of the game and the founder of the studio, the lead designer for Hearthstone for a number of years. So Marvel Snap, it is a collectible card game. Let me get off the animated teaser. So what is interesting is one of the big hooks for this game is that it's not turn-based. I mean, it is turn-based, but it's not traditional turn-based. So if I was playing against somebody, I can play my card at the same time they're playing theirs. So we can both play our hands at the exact same time, or they can choose to wait to see what I do, or I can choose to wait to see what they do. Each game only has 6 turns, and at the end of the 6 turns, the person who owns 2 of the middle portions of the board is the winner. So as when the first round starts, the board here, if you're watching the video, off to the left, will flip over, and tell you which location it is. So there's actually a better thing in this trailer. There we go. So on the left here, it is the Wakandan Embassy, and what it does is it gives +2 power to the cards in players' hands. So if your card is worth, has 1 power, on it, it's now 3. What is required is you can only place so many cards down in the portion below the middle card. So if you're placing cards down for the Wakandan Embassy, and then your opponent places cards down on the far right one, you may win this by default because he's not placing cards down, or they're not placing cards down here. But the middle one may be the one that becomes contested. So you can see here, the card that Ben here played is Yondu. And the specific benefit here is on reveal, it removes the top card from your opponent's deck. So when they go to play a card, it will basically remove it. So you can see here the other player played the Hawkeye card, which, on reveal, if you play a card here next turn, they add 2 to the power. So if any additional card gets placed in this square, in the remaining 3 spaces, they get an additional 2 to the power for the card. So what is required is, you can see here, the playing of this card has given him 3 instead of just 1. It's now 3 because of the bonus, and then so it's now 3 power for this one, whereas in the middle he's on 2 because he's only got the 1 card down. He's the same. It's the same board, but you can see it's more packed. But what I like, if we play it just a little bit, let me change the quality back up. When you see the cards flip over, they have this really 3D effect. They spin around, they do a sort of, not a lenticular sort of style, but it's like everything has like more depth to it. It's not just a card, like it's not just something with a picture on it. Obviously you can see the electric card here off to the left, and it is, it's just a standard 2D thing. But when they're played in the game, when they turn cards over, you'll see it all in all the detail. And they're not just using, their own art. Their own art does exist, but they're taking a lot of inspiration from, the 70 odd years of Marvel comic history. So there are some characters that have a more traditional look, and then there are some characters. There you go. So the Nakia card. There's the Ant-Man card. Let me just. I don't think it'll let me do. It does let me do playback speed. So here, just watch the turnover here of the snap card. You sort of see this 3D effect on the card. That's what I'm talking about. So, when these cards get flipped over, there's this really cool effect. What is interesting is, the game itself is coming to mobile, PC, and consoles. So it should hit everything. They've not confirmed what consoles it is coming to yet. They are going to be hosting a beta on Android. So if you do have an Android phone or an Android tablet, you can register for the beta on the game's website, which is just marvelsnap.com, and go for it there. I will post this link in the chat here, because there are a lot of things. So the video that we were watching just down here, this is just a full playthrough of two matches, and the one up here is actual breakdowns of, you know, what the game is, how you build decks, and all that sort of stuff. And it's not just built around the single, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe or something like that. It's built over all the Marvel storylines. So in the reveal trailer, Iron Man is, you know, its own girl. I can't remember her name. You know, America Chavez is in there, and Venom, you know, is there as the good guy. So, you know, and then they bust a portal into the multiverse, and out comes Miles Morales. So it's more based around, you know, if you have a favorite Marvel character that appeared in a once-off comic because they were in Universe 999 or something like that, you know, they may pop up in this game. What is interesting though is that in order to rank up and to level up yourself, you have to earn cosmic cubes, and that's sort of the level thing. And the more of those you have, you know, the more you level up, and the more powerful you become. How that plays out in the long run, we'll have to wait and see. It is a full-on, you know, free-to-play game, you know, as all these things are. Marvel are obviously behind it. Second Dinner, as I said, is a new studio. This is their first game. But the folks publishing it are Nuverse, and they've done a lot of mobile games. You know, they do everything they can to nickel and dime players. So if you're not a free-to-play game aficionado, this is something to maybe be a little wary of. I personally have never been a big, you know, card game fan. You know, I'd rather just play, if I'm going to play poker, I'd rather just play poker with a deck of cards, right? But something like this, where it's more about, you know, collecting the digital cards and then using them to you know, build up decks that, you know, maybe you can have a deck that's more speed focused, right? That's something that's very appealing to me. Moving on to some delay news, Test Drive Unlimited is no longer driving onto the scene this year. So just the other day, the development house Nacon and KT Racing announced that Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown, which is set in Hong Kong, will not be releasing in 2022 as originally planned. So it was actually dated for like September 15th, 2022, like a year ago. So it had sort of locked that date in pretty early on, which is a bit of a rarity. Most games these days will date themselves a few months out. Obviously, the exception to that is Starfield, which was dated last June. You know, that's been delayed as well. So the delay of this one is mostly just to allow the developers more time to ensure that the vision is done as accurately as possible. The Test Drive series has been going on for a number of years now. It gained sort of a bit of a boost in reputation back in the Xbox 360 era when Test Drive Unlimited, the first one, released, and it was set in Hawaii, specifically on the island of Oahu, and it was, you know, the full island. The second one released, it was a different developer. It was still Eden Studios, but they sort of gotten rid of a lot of stuff and hired a bunch of new stuff on it. It didn't really do that well. So much to the point where the studio actually shuttered and then reopened as a mobile games developer. So they went from making big, you know, AAA console games to then making smaller mobile games. They're the folks behind the Gear.Club series, which is on mobile and Switch. But back to this one, what is interesting about this game is it's not just a one-to-one recreation of Hong Kong Island and the Hong Kong surrounds. There's some 550 kilometers of roads, you know, in the game. It's not just a one-to-one recreation. So there are clubs and factions you can join. So you can join, just using the art here, you could join the Range Rover faction, okay? And they're all about, you know, the gold lifestyle, right? So you could join that one, which means that your character, you know, then focuses on collecting items and cars that, you know, reflect that. Or you could join the Aston Martin one on the left, which is, say, more about speed. So you want to be looking as sleek as possible. Obviously, that's oversimplifying it a whole lot. The full statement on the cancellation is on the blog post, which I've linked. But the basic gist is, it says, our goal is to meet the expectations and stay true to the franchise's DNA by including all the details, which they mentioned in the blog post. But we also want to go further off in new experiences. We want to make all of Hong Kong Island and its 550 kilometers of roads to be no limits playground where fun never ends. What is interesting, as I said, is there's a couple of bits of concept art they've put out here, and this is this is the sort of what they call the Sharp headquarters, and then this is the street headquarters. So that there are different clubs or factions based on the type of player you are. So if you're someone who enjoys racing, and you just want to be a racer, there's probably a club for that. If you're someone who just wants to chill out and just explore Hong Kong, by car, there'll be a club for that. The other interesting news is they did what Gotham Knights has done, and they've announced that the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions of the game are no longer happening. The reason why it's slightly more interesting here is because the game was originally announced for those two platforms, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, PC, and Switch. They've cancelled the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions, but Switch is still on the release schedule at this stage. Who knows, how long that's going to be the case. They may have just decided to drop, the last generation consoles, purely just to ensure that they can focus, where they need to the most. As I said this last week when Gotham Knights dropped, the last gen Xbox and PlayStation, it is mostly just going to be that the vision that they want is just not possible to achieve on all the platforms, especially given the disparity between the old Xbox, the original Xbox One release, which they have to technically support according to Microsoft, and the Xbox Series X. Technologically, there is obviously a vast difference in between what one can do versus the other. The sort of the later remodel, the later releases of the Xbox One model had different chipsets inside. They were faster, they were smoother to run. So they're slightly more powerful. The core guts is basically the same, but they're just more efficient at doing things. And obviously you have the Xbox One X as well. So there's a lot that people can sort of do, on those platforms that they can't do on the original one. And obviously we saw that with Cyberpunk. That game struggled to run very well on the original Xbox base model. If you had a Series X, it wasn't so bad. But that's sort of what leads me to believe that in order to make sure that the consoles that can handle the game can do it without any issues, they're just pulling resources away from older platforms for Gotham Knights and for Test Drive. But as I said, it is kind of interesting that the Switch version is still apparently coming, but they went out of their way to cancel the old Xbox and PlayStations. I'm very excited for it. I love Hong Kong as a city. I think Hong Kong is a fantastic place. I have some very, very fun memories of visiting there multiple times. But at the same time, it's also, a bit of a fusion of East meets West. I like to tell people that if you want to experience China, but you're unsure about if you're going to like China, you go to Hong Kong. Because Hong Kong was, under English rule for, a century and change. It has a very... what's the word I'm thinking of? It has a very sort of mixed atmosphere. So even though, it is still a Chinese, it's a region of China now, the people there are considered Chinese. There's a lot of English influences everywhere still. So it's kind of like, you want to visit China, you dip one foot in Hong Kong and you get a sort of China light experience. So yeah, that's why I think Hong Kong is great. So I'm very excited for that. Obviously, the one-to-one recreation is always fun. How it shapes out, we just have to wait and see. Moving on to games that did get release dates, we have finally learned that Roller Champions is actually coming out. So if you think back, if you're here in Australia and you went to PAX Australia back in 2019, you will have seen a game at on the booth floor called Roller Champions, which is a 3v3 roller skating arena game. It gained some pretty passionate fans from that showing, and sort of 4 or 5 months after that, the game basically went radio silent. We hadn't heard anything from the game for a long time, but during the week, Ubisoft formally revealed that the game is set to release next week. And when I say next week, I don't mean like the end of it. I mean May 25th. So it's literally, we're looking like 5 days from now, which is Tuesday. Yeah, something like that. It is a free-to-play game. So take from that what you will. Ubisoft's track record on free-to-play titles isn't the best. What is interesting is it is coming to all platforms eventually, but Switch is not included in this initial rollout. It is only coming to PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, next week. The Switch version will come later. What is interesting though is, it has, crossplay and all that sort of stuff. But they're doing sort of the Fortnite route, so there will be things that you can unlock as you play. But if you want sort of everything, you want more gear, more swag, there are, there's what they call a roller. They call it something specific. It's just season pass. They call it the roller pass. Sorry. The roller pass, it basically explains, gives you more content. I have an overview trailer here, and I'll throw the old quality up. For some reason, it always defaults back to the smallest that it can get away with. But yeah, so it is, as I said, it's a 3v3, multiplayer game where it's all about scoring points. So the basic rule is your team of 3. If you get the ball, you've got to do a few laps of the arena. Once you've done enough laps, the goal opens. You throw the ball through the goal, you get a point. If you choose not to throw the ball on that pass, when you get around for the next lap, the point total increases. As you can see, they're showing here. The first player to get to 5 points, or the first team to get to 5 points, wins. So it's technically possible, if you get the ball within the first 30 seconds of the match starting, if you manage to make all the way around, 3 times after unlocking the first ring, the first point, the first goal, whatever you want to call it, you could win the match. The catch, obviously, is that if you're tackled, like, as you would expect, or, you throw the ball to another player but it gets intercepted, you lose anything. So if you have everything unlocked to the 5th level and you're about to throw and you get tackled and lose the ball, your goal closes, you lose the streak, and you've got to start all over again when you get the ball next. As you can see here, they're showing off some of the practice arenas, the practice facilities. You can do tricks, not that that's relevant, but you can use, your speed and your height to, power down into the ground to sort of, disrupt the play from the opposing team. What I find interesting is that it's a very simple concept. I honestly, this is the very same game that they announced, years ago. But when they said this is what they were doing, I didn't think it was going to remain that way. I thought that was very much, this is our first design phase of it. This is all we're doing now. But the fact that they've, kept it this way is interesting. So yeah, it is kind of, different that they've done it that way. I won't say it's the worst idea in the world. And as you can see here, this is the sort of the roller pass, comparison. But I honestly, I worry that the game may struggle to find an audience because of its, simplistic nature. Obviously, there are going to be some players that just enjoy it being as basic as it is. It's not Call of Duty where they've got to worry about, 17 different guns and the various loadouts and, what random event is happening and all that sort of stuff. So it could gain a lot of attention for that, but I just think it may be a little too simplistic. But then again, people love Fortnite, and that game is as basic as you can get. So, the fact that the game is actually coming out next week is a big thing. Obviously, we will do what we can for coverage on it. It is a free-to-play, multiplayer game, so there will be some restrictions on early access for us because, until the servers are live, we can't do anything. If the servers are live, other people can get in as well. What is something, a little interesting is last week, I got to see Saints Row in action. And when I say see Saints Row in action, I don't mean, a new trailer. I mean, like 55 minutes of gameplay. It was a fairly lengthy presentation by the developers at Volition. So we got to see the opening mission. I didn't get to play it. Let me just put that out there. sometimes they do these previews where we do get to play early. Sometimes it's hands off where we're just watching. It's the same thing at E3. I remember years and years ago when Horizon Zero Dawn was first announced. They had that massive trailer, the thing. I went to the PlayStation booth the following 2 days later, and I sat in the room with the game's director and the lead designer, and there was me and two other journalists, and we just watched them play for half an hour. Especially that early on, they're very scripted in their approach, because they're more about ensuring the presentation is as smooth as it can be. And if it's a very early build of a game, they don't want people going hands-on and maybe turning the camera in a direction where there's nothing rendered yet. So hands-off demos aren't all that new, but this is one of those. This is probably one of the biggest hands-off demos I've ever had. So we got to see the opening mission. We got to see the basic story about how you, which is that's the sort of the marketing version of you on the screen there. Kevin, I can't remember his name. Miles. It's not Miles, but I can't think of the other guy's name. And Nina, how they all come together to form the Saints. We got to see a couple of missions. We got to see character customization, weapon customization, car customization. The cool thing is, player customization isn't just you throwing on a different outfit, by going to a shop and buying it. At any point, you can just pull out the phone in the game and swap from whatever outfit you're wearing to one you've saved as a preset. So if you're walking around the streets in your Saints Row gear, but you're about to do a heist mission, you may choose to dress like a burglar, or you may go the other way and decide to dress like a clown, literally. The big red nose and everything. The other interesting thing is that your body shape is never locked in place. So at the start of the game, there'll be customization options, so you can choose to be a, purple metallic skinned alien looking guy with a prosthetic leg. If halfway through the game you decide that's no longer who you want to be, you can change everything. If after the first mission you've decided you don't like the person that you don't like the look of the character you've made, you can replace all that as well. So you could just choose to do a different haircut, or you can choose to change gender, body shape, voice, everything. If you like the person you have but you don't like the voice, change the voice only. So there's no sort of restrictions on that. I won't go too much into it there. I do suggest you give it the preview a read, because it does go into some more detail. We got to see some off-road action as well, which is very cool because it is set in the desert, so there is a lot of off-roading there as well. The only thing that worries me about this game is it's still very basic in its missions that we've seen. So the first mission is a tutorial mission, so there's a lot of shooting, a lot of melee combat, some driving, which makes sense. One of the side missions that we got to see was you helping out somebody do a heist. And you were just basically the muscle to sit in shotgun and literally use guns to stop the cops from chasing you down. Another one was you and a friend via co-op, because the game does support co-op that way. Just causing as much chaos and destruction as you can to earn money. And then the other two, they sound very, very cool. I didn't go into detail in the preview, and I won't go into detail now. But they're very much a product of running and gunning and shooting a lot of things, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying it needs to be, something completely different, but the game is all about choice. They make that very clear from the very first trailer last year. It was all about player choice, and I asked the developers, what if you don't want to run the cops off the road? Like, the opening mission has you trying to evade the cops, and it says destroy the cop cars, and I'm like, well, okay, this is a game about choice. What if you don't want to do that? And they said you're free to just outrun them. So for a game that's all about choice, but then it funnels you into these missions where it's do exactly what we say, it seems a little weird. Hopefully that's they've just shown those off because they're the easiest for people to connect with. Obviously, there's the whole sort of micro game about managing the phony, well, not the phony businesses, but the front businesses that you set up. So you can, buy into the food truck game, which is, the code for the drug game. So there's a lot more going on there as well. And obviously there's the whole, building up your brand, your Saints brand, getting people to join your gang. And then you can, with car customization, you can say, hey, every car that, is part of the Saints crew has to look like this. It's purple with a metal, mohawk down the middle or something, right? So there's a lot of options there for things, but I just hope there's more variety in the main gameplay itself. Finally, this week, before we move on to the games that are coming out next week, there is some actual details of the PlayStation Plus enhancement, membership offerings that are coming out for us on June 23rd. So what is interesting, the service is launching this week in select parts of Asia, launching very early in June in Japan, then a bit later in June for the USA, and then Europe and Australia and New Zealand get it later in June. So what is interesting is the lineup itself. So when I say the lineup, if we're being honest, it is pathetic. And it's not pathetic in terms of the games. So for the PlayStation Plus Essential, which is the basic tier, which is the same one that exists right now, that's staying the same. So the 2 free games a month, there's nothing changing there. Where things become weird is in the extra and premium tiers. So the extra tier is adding an extra $55 a year to the plan. So it goes from $80 a year to like $135 a year. And it includes what they call the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games library. Right, when they announced this, they said, 400 games would be in this library. They've confirmed like 60, which is, a lot less. If you're not good at maths, 60 is a lot smaller than 400. What is interesting too is, the Bloodborne, developed by From Software, published by PlayStation, that's included. Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, that's a PlayStation exclusive, that's in here. God of War, the Gravity Rush games are here, Horizon. Infamous First Light's not a full game, don't get excited, it's DLC. Second Son is the full game, that's here. So, but these are a lot of games that, some of these are already in the PlayStation collection. So God of War is in the collection. Bloodborne is in the collection. The Last of Us is in the collection. So these are already in the PlayStation Plus collection, which is available today as part of the essential PlayStation Plus membership. We don't know if that's actually going away when they do launch this new thing, but my point stands is they're still there. Some of these games are pretty cool, like Spider-Man and the Miles Morales DLC. But this is where things get weird, right? So the Marvel Spider-Man game is the PlayStation 4 edition. It's not the PlayStation 5 edition, which, fixed a few things and made things smoother. It's just the PS4 version. But the Miles Morales game, or the DLC for it technically, is both PS4 and PS5. So this is where things get really weird. Okay, they're putting the Uncharted 4 game, Uncharted 4 Thieves' End and Uncharted Lost Legacy from PlayStation 4 in the collection, but not the PlayStation 5 remasters that released earlier this year. Right, and that's just the PlayStation stuff. In terms of the third-party stuff, we've got Assassin's Creed Valhalla from Ubisoft, because the Ubisoft Plus program is coming to PlayStation as well on the same day. City Skylines, Control, NBA 2K22. So they've got some good games in here. But again, these do not equal 400. So if you were hoping, to have a massive library of games that you could just download whenever you wanted, that's not the case. Now, they have said the middle of every month, sort of going forward, they'll be shuffling the games. That means that, let's say, Batman Arkham Knight, which is one of the third-party editions, that launches on the service on June 23rd. Come, say, July 15th, that could be removed and Arkham City goes in its place. Or, something else from Warner Brothers, like Shadow of War, Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, right? So there's a bunch of... There's nothing specific about the full lineup. Whether or not this is the full lineup, we don't know. But as I said, they did promise like 400 games for this service, for this tier. If the premium tier, which is the middle one, so the extra tier is not enough for you, they have the premium tier. Now, in the USA, the premium tier comes with PlayStation 3 games. We're not getting that here because they're streaming only. For us, you get everything from the library from before, but you get some PlayStation, so PS1, and PSP games. They also promised PlayStation 2 games, but there's no mention of those at this point. These are all the PlayStation 1 and PSP games. And when I say PSP games, I should say PSP game, because there's only one. So there's no, Chinatown Wars or Liberty City Stories from Rockstar on this. There's one game. What is really, really bad is that there's only 5 PlayStation 1 games from Sony. And yes, they're not Final Fantasy VII or anything like that. But there's more games from Sony on the PlayStation Mini than there is on this device, on this plan. The third-party games are sort of even worse. Tekken 2 is a great addition. I will fully play that no matter how often it comes out. Mr. Driller, I could take it or leave it. Don't think we needed 2 different versions of Worms. They're both quite different, but they're still the same core game. But this is what's really sort of weird. They're also putting some remasters in here, okay, not in the standard release of PlayStation 4 games, right? So BioShock Remastered, the Borderlands Collection, Lego Harry Potter Collection from third party, the Jack Collection, so Jack and Daxter, Jack 2, Jack 3, and Jack X Combat Racing. They're all remastered. They all got sort of enhanced for the PlayStation 4. These are not included in the PlayStation 4 library. These are only included in the extra, right? So this is the ultimate tier, the premium tier of the PlayStation Plus enhancements. And again, we're not getting PlayStation 3 games. So I was always cautious about this service because of how less than special it appeared to be. It's not. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that from what they promised when they announced it to what they're delivering now doesn't seem worth it. Now, I will fully admit Nintendo have been guilty of this in the past as well. They've sort of corrected themselves a little bit lately. We see it with Xbox. They do Game Pass updates like once a month. They'll say, hey, here's 10 more games coming to Game Pass. They're a little trickier because sometimes these games that are coming to Game Pass are already there. They're now just coming to the cloud, or the PC version is getting included, right, as well as the Xbox. Or it was on PC initially, it's now coming to Xbox. Here's the Xbox version. So they're a little tricky doing it that way. And I assume PlayStation will do something similar. I'll say, hey, here's the refresh. We're adding, these 8 games, to the PS4, PS5 library. PlayStation 1's getting another game, something like that. The problem is that's not what they promised. When they announced this service, they promised 400 PS4, PS5 games. Now, obviously, there are not 400 PlayStation 5 games, but there are 400 PlayStation 4 games. So they promised a library of games that they're not delivering day one. Nintendo, when they announced the Nintendo 64 expansion for the Nintendo Switch Online membership and the Mega Drive at the same day, they said, hey, these are the games launching day one for both these platforms. And then for Nintendo 64, they said, hey, these are also 10 additional games that are coming out. We didn't know when they were coming, but they've kept a release cadence of one every month. Kirby 64 just released today. So it took them a while to get their head, around a release cadence that works with the Nintendo 64, and they have done that. The NES and Super NES apps, they get updated every 3 months. We get 1 Super NES game, 2 NES games, or vice versa. They're not games people know all that well, if at all. So it is really weird for Nintendo how they've done it. But Nintendo didn't promise, when they announced this service, they didn't say, hey, you'll have access to 350 NES games. They just said, we'll be adding NES games, to the service over time. So they sort of got out of it by not promising anything, but PlayStation did promise, and they haven't delivered. They haven't given us enough to justify, us being excited for it, us saying, hey, this is great, this is what we really want from them. They've sort of just said, no, this is everything, this is all we're doing for now, but still sign up. And I don't think the promise that they're offering justifies the day one sign up of the PlayStation Plus tiers, if you will. I just don't think it's there value-wise. It could be in the long run, but for now, it's not. I did forget a couple of stories, so we're going to jump into those before we move on. That is, today, Outright Games, in partnership with Bandai Namco, announced 4 new games aimed for children. I say aimed for children, they're sort of all ages games, but if you're playing Paw Patrol and you're a 50-year-old person, you may have some other issues going on. So going in order of the release dates or release windows that we know, the first one is Paw Patrol Grand Prix. So this one is a little different in that it is a racing game. What is interesting about it is it has all the main characters, so Chase and all that sort of stuff. It offers 4-player split screen, so Mario Kart has that as well. So this is very much the same thing. It does things like auto, acceleration, like mobile games do. So if you're have 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds playing, they can still enjoy it and not have to worry about accelerating and steering. They can just do one of the actions. I think this is a little anemic on content. There are only 11 tracks. I mean, not comparing it to Mario Kart with what it has now with the booster course pack or the deluxe version, but Mario Kart 8 on Wii U, it launched with 32 tracks. So for a game to come out and say, hey, we're a racing game, come play us, here's 11 tracks, that just seems a little light in content for me. Again, it's definitely not aimed at somebody of my age or my gaming skill level. I've got a 6-year-old nephew. He's a Paw Patrol fan. He'd love playing this. So this one will be out on September 30, and it's coming to all platforms. So Switch, PS4, Xbox One, PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S. The second game that was announced today was Star Trek Prodigy Supernova, which is based off the cartoon Star Trek Prodigy series that launched last year. So Paramount, over the past few years, they've had like 3 live-action Star Trek shows. Another one just started recently. It's the original sort of reboot of the show. There was the Picard series. There's the animated Under Floors show, and now there's this sort of kids show. This is based very much in the same zone. So it is all about, it's based on characters from the show, features the voice actors from the show. I've never seen the show, so I really don't know much about what they're doing. I do know that Captain Jane from the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, she's in the show. She, the actress is there lending her voice for that character. I'll be honest, it sort of reminds me of like a Diablo. It's a very, very sort of basic Diablo-ish sort of game to me, gameplay-wise. But much like the Paw Patrol Grand Prix above, this is a very slow game. So I'm sort of calling it Diab slow in my mind. Not because it's a bad thing, I just think it's they're doing very little in terms of pushing things forward. That game is set to release sometime in October. We don't have a specific release date yet, but that's when they're looking to release that one. The third game that they announced is Dragon Legends of the Nine Realms. Its full title is DreamWorks Dragons, but DreamWorks is the company that makes it. That's not part of the actual thing. That'd be like calling it Pixar Toy Story. That's just a weird way of doing it. This is based off the sequel show that didn't need to exist from the movies. So obviously the How to Train Your Dragon series, there's 3 movies, 2 TV shows, a few games. They released a game a few years ago as well from Outright Games, Legends, Dawn of a New Rider. Sorry, this one's based off the animated show, which is set 1,300 years after the events of the movies with Hiccup and Astrid and Toothless and all that. In the other game that Outright did, based on the How to Train Your Dragons property, you play it as a human. It was very dungeon crawly like. This one seems a little more, 3D platformer, and this time you're playing as Thunder, who is what do they call him? A light fury. So if you've seen the last movie, the Toothless is a night fury, and then there's the female dragon, which is the white one. They call her a light something or other, and this is basically just merging those two. But yeah, it looks fine. It looks like it's a sort of generic platformer with some light puzzles. Again, this is coming to all of them. So all the games in this list that we've talked about so far are PC, Switch, Xbox, PlayStation. How this one shapes up, we have to wait and see. It is set to release sometime this spring. I think, though, if it was going to be in September or October, they'd say that. The fact they've said spring leads me to believe it's likely to be a November release. They're just not sure yet. It could come out earlier, but we'll have to wait and see. The other game that they've announced isn't technically announced because they've not got any details. But all it is, it's just known as the DC Justice League game. It's got this really weird My Sims style, character design. And if you're watching the video, you've seen the trailer, and the trailer is all of 15 seconds long. There's literally no details. We know the platforms, so again, it's the same: Switch, PC, PS4, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and PlayStation 5. But that's it. We don't know the full name. We don't know a release window apart from next year. We don't even know what type of game it is. We don't even know if it's is it a platformer? Is it a RTS? Is it a racing game? Is it a puzzle game, right? We know nothing about it. And even that teaser tells us very little. So it is interesting that, Outright Games have announced 4 games at once. The developers, I've said this before, and this only really makes sense if you're an old fart like me, that Outright Games have become the modern day THQ. So THQ Nordic exists, but it's not the same THQ that I'm talking about. So in the mid 2000s, THQ were the masters of the licensed game. So if there was a Disney Pixar movie coming out, there was a THQ game not far behind. They released an Incredibles game based on the movie, and then a year later we had another Incredibles game based on the last few minutes of the movie where the Underminer comes out. They built a whole game around that, which was then completely obliterated story-wise when the Incredibles sequel released. So, they did games for Finding Nemo, they did it for SpongeBob, basically anything Nickelodeon, was there. We had some Avatar games. So they did a lot of licensed things. When THQ back then went belly up, there wasn't really anyone stepping in to make licensed games. Licensed titles, we saw Activision do a few. They did like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers, and Avatar: The Legend of Korra. I say they did. They paid for it, but Platinum Games developed them. They were all, they're decent games. They're not the best, but they're okay. We saw some stuff from Ubisoft with Naruto over the years, but they're all, they're few and far between compared to what THQ were putting out, and that all comes down to THQ having, their business model was based around sort of pushing the licensed thing because it was always hey, you just saw the movie, now play the game. When THQ went belly up, nobody else was stepping in that way, in that capacity to make these games, and that's what Outright Games are doing now. So this year they've got a Spirit game, which is based on the horses. They've had in the years past, they did a Transformers game, which was a turn-based thing like XCOM. They did a Hotel Transylvania game just early this year as well. They've done a couple of Paw Patrol games. I'm just now loading up their website so I can list off some of the things they've done. Unfortunately, their website isn't the best. So they've done some Ryan's games. I don't know who that is, some YouTuber. There's a Fast and Furious Spy Racers show on Netflix. They've done a video game for that. They did the Peppa Pig game, which is literally just Peppa Pig. They've done some Addams Family stuff. I said they've done a lot of Paw Patrol games. LOL, Bratz. I said the Transformers game is there as well. They did a game based on Troll Hunters. They've done some Ben 10 stuff. So they're really sort of delving into the licensing like nobody else has done. So yeah, see here there's an Ice Age game. There's some Adventure Time stuff. So these aren't the sort of games that, you know, somebody who plays you know, World of Warcraft is going to sink some time into. You know, in terms of gameplay, they're pretty basic. They're not shallow. There's still some mechanics in there, but they're simplified in a way that, you know, if you have little ones, they are the sort of games that your little ones can enjoy without having to worry about, you know, learning moves. So, sort of a comparison would be, you know, if you enjoy Street Fighter 2, this would be, you know, Street Fighter but with one button for attack, right? And that's it. So it still gives the sort of the sense of fighting, but it doesn't require you to learn the 9-step button combinations to do the attacks. They're fine games. I've reviewed a few of them over the years. As I said, my nieces and nephews have had some of the games as well. They enjoy them because that's aimed at that age group, which is rare because there's so many games these days, so few games these days aimed at, you know, sort of the under 10 age group. So that anything Nintendo does is generally okay for kids, but if you put Super Mario Odyssey in their hands on a Switch, that game, they can run around, they can jump, that's great. But when you say, hey, you need to wall jump off this, then, you know, shimmy around this ledge, then, you know, climb up this vine, throw Cappy at this thing so he, you know, grows tall so you can, you know, jump on him, right? Something like that, that's a little too complex for, say, a 7-year-old. If you have a 7-year-old and they can do that, fantastic. You know, they're doing pretty well. But for the average child, that's a little too complex. So these games, you know, give that same sense of satisfaction, but without the complexity behind it. So they're you know, as I said, announced 4 games overnight, and that's pretty good. They are keeping that release cadence going. It is interesting, Outright Games themselves do not develop. They're sort of just the overseer of it. It's actually a bunch of other developers doing the actual work for them. So, yeah. Also announced overnight is a new game from Frogwares. And the reason why I'm talking about this is it's because Frogwares are based in Kyiv in the Ukraine. So even though in the middle of their country being invaded by Russia, these developers have said, hey, we're not stopping. We want to make games. We're still going to make games. At the moment, it's just a very light tease for their next game. It is currently called Project Panelistia. A full reveal is expected later in the summer. They released 2 statements. And I'll just read off the first one here by Sergei Oganesyan, the communications manager. It just says, we are revealing the game now in this way to simply show people we are pushing on, and also a clear middle finger to those who thought they could just roll into our country hoping to disrupt and ruin our lives. While still challenging prior to this, everything we released during the war was existing projects that needed to be finalised. We're now making something almost entirely from scratch, which was a lot harder under the circumstances, so we needed to think smart about what was realistic for us. The idea was greenlit for this very reason, as it's something our current team and setup can deliver compared to doing pre-production on another open world title, which is what we were doing prior to the war. The name Panelistia is symbolic to Ukraine, as it's considered part of our national cuisine. It's also the equivalent of the phonetical Dark Souls for Russians who can't often quite pronounce it correctly when trying to pass off as Ukrainian. I can't pronounce it correctly, but I'm not trying to be Ukrainian. And now is often used in the field as a test to quickly identify possible affiliation of unknown individuals. That's sort of a, code word response thing. So, like the Americans, when they landed at D-Day, they would say flash. And then if the response they got back was thunder, that meant, hey, great, you're one of us, we know you. If they said flash and they didn't get the appropriate response back, they would generally shoot whoever that, you know, spoke. So there is a much longer statement, which again, I'll throw the link here in the Twitch chat. It is definitely, I said, it's very early still. It's just some concept art. It is going to be a Victorian era style mystery game, which is definitely in the wheelhouse of the developers, you know, with the Sherlock Holmes games that they've done and the Sinking City. But it is not a full-on reveal yet. But I think this is fantastic because, you know, I'm very lucky. My country's never been invaded, and it's highly unlikely it ever will be because of where we are. So, you know, even in the midst of an invasion, of these folks, their country's being invaded, people they may know are fighting back, people are being killed in the streets, you know, they're still saying, hey, this is what we're passionate about, this is what we want to do, and by us doing it, we're saying, hey, we don't care what you say, you can't control us, you know, we've got the power to make our own decisions, and this is the decision we're making. I think it's a fantastic, essentially, as Sergey said in his thing, a middle finger to Russia. Hopefully, you know, the invasion ends and these guys can go back to doing what they do, you know, in safety. But yeah, I just thought it's just something fantastic, you know, because how often do we get games announced from countries that are, you know, war torn? Almost never. So yeah, as it's just something a little different. All right, moving on to the games coming out in the next sort of week or so. This week was really quiet. We had Deadcraft, as I said, it's the zombie tower defense farming game. It's a little weird. And Vampire the Masquerade Swan Song hit most platforms, Switch is still to come. Next week is a pretty busy week comparatively. There's a few games, you know, coming. So on the 24th of May, we have Hardspace Shipbreaker. I kept getting that name mixed up. I kept calling it Hardship Spacebreaker for the longest time. It is a PC only release for now. It is coming to Xbox and PlayStation later in the year. It is a demolition game, but the demolition is done in space. So you are literally breaking ships apart, therefore the Shipbreaker, in the vacuum of space. There's the hard space. So it's not just a matter of just, you know, cutting things up, because as you break pieces of the ship off, they may float away. So you've got to sort of manage everything you're doing. Also on the 24th is Token Ranbu Warriors for Switch. It released in Japan earlier in the year. It is another Warriors style game from Koei Tecmo, but it features, you know, a whole new cast of characters and storyline and all that sort of stuff. On the 26th of May, we'll see the release of Sniper Elite 5 for PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and PlayStation 5, as well as launching into Xbox Game Pass on the same day. What is interesting for that list for that game is that it is essentially changing up the way that you can get around. You can now climb on towers by climbing up the side of them instead of having to find stairs. If there's vines, on the side of a building, you can use those to climb up. So it's not so much that it's using them to sort of push through, to say, hey, this is the way you have to go. It's now giving you more and more options. Another one of the big options for that game is that, if you say, hey, this is a game called Sniper Elite, I'm going to be an elite sniper. But then you find yourself constantly getting flanked and shot in the back. You may choose to get rid of the pistol you're carrying and instead have a shotgun or an assault rifle, right? But in past games, you would have to quit out of the mission, pick a new loadout, go back in. Now you can, as long as there's if you find a weapon bench somewhere in the game, and there's a few of them around each level, you can head up to it and say, cool, I'm now inside the big building. I don't need a sniper rifle because it's not going to come in handy inside. So you can put the sniper rifle away, pull out, say, an assault rifle or a machine gun. But let's say, you started out and you realized, hey, I've got a sniper rifle, but it's a bit too loud. So you can put a suppressor on it, right? Or you can put an extended magazine in, you can put a different stock on it, different sights. So you can actually customize the weapons to suit how you play, and then set up a loadout for you. So you can say, this is my I'm going to try stealthy first, right? And then this is I tried stealthy and failed loadout and stuff like that. So that's also on the 26th. On the 27th, Cow the Kangaroo is punching back out to release. So this is a brand new game in the series that started originally on the Dreamcast. There's been a couple of games on the PS2, on the GameCube, Game Boy Advance as well. But this is the first game in a number of years for the the boxing kangaroo. Despite the fact that it features a boxing kangaroo, it's not made by an Australian team. So yeah, Tate Multimedia is the developer for this one. We will have a review. We will have a review of it by the time the game comes out. Also on the 27th, so the last game of the month, at least for now, is the Pac-Man Museum Plus. Which is the collection of Pac-Man games. So it is, Pac-Man 256, and basically everything else. The only one it will not feature is Miss Pac-Man because of some weird licensing thing. It is coming to all platforms as well, and it will be available inside of Xbox Game Pass on release day. So yeah, that is the games of, as I said, for the rest of the month, because yeah. It's a pretty busy month. It's not packed. There's nothing sort of the first couple of days of the week after, which is 30th and 31st of May. But yeah, it's a pretty decent collection of games to sort of finish up on. As I said, Heartspace Shipbreaker is definitely unique because it is a simulation game, but it is set in space, which there are very few games that do that. So. If you're looking for games the week after, Card Shark and Diablo are out that week. So, with that brings us to the end of another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. If you did watch live, thank you for watching live. If you watched the replay, I hope you enjoyed the replay. We record these every Friday, normally at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. This episode is a little different. We recorded it a bit later than normal. Every Tuesday, we stream part of our ongoing series. At the moment, we're still playing through the James Bond series. We're playing through all the James Bond console games. We're in the final stretches of the GoldenEye Rogue Agent title. And once that is done, we'll be moving on to From Russia With Love, the one with Sean Connery. And then we'll be moving out of the GameCube era and into the Xbox 360 era. Beyond that, though, we may start doing some weekend streams, so you may see us on, say, like a Sunday night or something. But yeah, that is us done for this week. If you do, like to watch live, please consider subscribing and following the channel, subscribing to the YouTube video. We will see you next week when we're back online. But until then, happy gaming.